The grand victory. The wreckage of the Zarn Dominion's once mighty armada drifted lifelessly through the void. The battle had raged for weeks, but now, at last, it was over. The United Coalition of Species, UCS, had won. Across the vast battlefield, surviving warships of a dozen alien civilizations pulsed their lights in a synchronized rhythm, an ancient tradition of triumph. Cheers, roars, and telepathic bursts of joy echoed across fleet-wide channels. On the bridge of the Imperium's hand, Admiral Carvax of the Etherian hierarchy stood tall, his bioluminescent exoskeleton glowing a proud gold. He turned to the assembled officers of the UCS High Command, their diverse forms reflecting the galactic unity forged through decades of war. "The Zarn are finished," Carvax declared. "The galaxy is free at last." A raucous cheer erupted from his officers. The Zarn had been a scourge upon the stars, enslaving or annihilating any species in their path. It had taken the combined strength of the UCS to finally break their empire. The price had been steep, entire planets reduced to ash, fleets obliterated, but victory was theirs. Admiral Sulek, a reptilian Vorthian with piercing golden eyes, leaned forward. "With the Zarn gone, the balance of power is secured. No force in the galaxy remains to challenge us." "Indeed," Carvax agreed. "Now we must consolidate our rule, ensure no new threats arise." A holographic display flickered to life before them, showing a list of non-aligned species. Most were small, insignificant remnants of civilizations that had survived on the fringes of war. Among them, near the bottom, was one labeled humanity, pre-FTL species. Sulek flicked his tongue in amusement. "Ah, the Terrans. A strange little race. They never engaged in the war. Most of our analysts consider them primitive, a backwater species still confined to their home system." Carvax nodded. "The reports indicate they are fiercely independent. But now that the war is over, the UCS must unify the remaining worlds under our banner. Earth should be offered protection, and if they resist, we will bring them to heel." A communication officer approached, bowing respectfully. "Admiral, we have transmitted an official notice to the Terrans, informing them of our victory and inviting them to accept UCS governance." No response yet. Sulek let out a dry chuckle. "What choice do they have? Even the mightiest civilizations fell before us. They will submit, or they will be crushed." The fleet continued its celebrations, basking in the glory of conquest. Across thousands of vessels, crews reveled in the triumph, raising toasts to the new order. None of them thought to monitor the outer system. None of them saw the void ripple as something vast and terrible emerged from the darkness. And none of them knew that Earth had never been idle. Earth's answer. Aboard the Imperium's hand, Admiral Carvax's patience was beginning to wear thin. It had been hours since the UCS transmitted its message to Earth, yet the Terrans had not responded. No acknowledgement, no defiance, just silence. "They are either too afraid to reply," mused Admiral Sulek, flicking his forked tongue, "or they don't understand their place in the galaxy." Carvax frowned. Something about the silence unsettled him. Primitive though the humans were, even a lesser species would have sent a token diplomatic response. Had their leaders fled? Were they too technologically backward to process the transmission? "Double-check the transmission logs," Carvax ordered. "Ensure the message was received." The communication officer's talons danced over the console. A moment later, their spines stiffened. "Sir, the transmission was received. Confirmed by multiple Terran relay stations." Sulek gave a predatory grin. "Then their inaction is a sign of submission. A silent surrender. We should move in and—" Before he could finish, a proximity alarm blared across the bridge. The tactical officer spun in his seat, mandibles clicking in alarm. Massive gravitational distortions detected on the edge of the system. Carvax turned sharply. "The Zarn are gone. What could—" A holographic projection flickered to life, displaying the outer edges of the system. At first, there was nothing. Then, space itself seemed to twist and rupture as dozens of massive warships emerged from the void. The bridge fell into stunned silence. The ships were unlike anything in the UCS database. Each one was a behemoth of reinforced alloys, their dark hulls bristling with unknown weapon systems. They were massive, dwarfing even the UCS's largest dreadnoughts. Their angular design spoke of function over form, no grand ornamentation, no unnecessary flourishes. These were warships, built with a singular purpose: destruction. "Who are they?" Sulek rasped. "They can't be." A signal burst through every UCS communication channel, overriding encryption protocols effortlessly. The bridge speakers crackled as a voice, deep and deliberate, resonated through the ship. "You were so busy celebrating that you forgot to check who wasn't invited to the party." The voice spoke in flawless Galactic standard. No distortion, no hesitation. The tactical officer's hands trembled over the controls. "The signal, it's coming from the lead vessel." They hesitated before adding. "Designation, UHS Warspite, Terran Registry." A slow realization crept over the command staff. The warships, these monsters, belonged to Earth. Sulek's reptilian eyes darted toward Carvax. "This is impossible. They were supposed to be primitive. We never detected shipyards capable of building such vessels." Carvax said nothing, his gaze locked on the holographic projection. The Terran ships were not merely present. They had arrived in formation, their movements disciplined and precise. This was not an exploratory fleet or a desperate last stand. This was a military operation, and humanity had just made its move. Humanity strikes. Aboard the Imperium's Hand, silence hung thick in the air. The officers of the United Coalition of Species, USS, stood frozen, staring at the impossible sight before them. Earth's fleet of dreadnoughts, emerging from the void like specters of war. Then, without warning, the first shot was fired. A lance of white-hot energy erupted from the bow of the UHS Warspite, crossing the void in an instant. The beam struck a UCS battleship head-on, slicing through its shields like wet paper. A second later, the ship detonated in a brilliant explosion, its wreckage scattering across the system. "Return fire!" Admiral Carvax roared, snapping the stunned crew into action. Across the UCS fleet, weapons systems powered up, plasma cannons and ion lances locking onto the human vessels. The air buzzed with hurried commands as targeting solutions were calculated. Within moments, the void was alive with streaks of energy and ballistic fire. But the Terran dreadnoughts were already moving. Instead of rigid formations and predictable maneuvers, the human ships operated with terrifying fluidity. They twisted and rolled, shifting between attack patterns like a swarm of apex predators. Their movements were precise, calculated, adaptive in a way no UCS fleet had ever seen. The UCS ships, accustomed to overwhelming lesser foes through superior numbers and firepower, were caught completely off guard. Their battle formations, honed over centuries, suddenly felt archaic in the face of Earth's brutal efficiency. On the bridge of the Imperium's Hand, Admiral Sulek's scales paled as another battleship was obliterated by a kinetic impact round the size of a dropship. "What are those weapons?" he hissed. "Railguns," Carvax muttered, eyes widening as he realized the implications. Mass-accelerated projectiles moving at near-relativistic speeds. Sulek turned, his forked tongue flicking nervously. Impossible. The recoil alone should tear those ships apart. Yet the dreadnoughts continued firing, launching projectiles capable of punching through UCS shielding as if it didn't exist. Then, the second wave hit. Swarms of AI-controlled attack drones poured from hidden bays within the human fleet. Unlike traditional fighter squadrons, these drones didn't move in formation. They weaved chaotically, adapting in real time to enemy counterfire. They targeted weak points with terrifying precision, slipping through shield gaps and latching onto UCS hulls before detonating in pinpoint explosions. Within minutes, the tide had turned. The UCS forces, once confident in their dominance, were now in full retreat. Battleships were being torn apart, their hulls breached by railgun fire and drone swarms. Entire squadrons were wiped out before they could even adjust tactics. And then, the final message came, broadcast across all channels from Warspite. We gave you time to come in peace. You chose arrogance instead. Now you will learn what it means to provoke Earth. Admiral Carvax gritted his teeth, watching as the UCS's so-called invincible fleet crumbled before the might of humanity. For the first time in his life, he felt true fear. The new Galactic Order. The bridge of the Imperium's hand was eerily quiet. The once proud UCS fleet lay in ruin, reduced to burning wreckage drifting in the void. What had begun as a celebration of triumph had become a massacre. Humanity had arrived, and they had made their intentions clear. Admiral Carvax stood motionless, his bioluminescent exoskeleton dimmed to a dull gray, the color of surrender in his species' culture. His officers barely dared to breathe, their eyes fixed on the enormous Terran dreadnoughts that still loomed over them, weapons primed but silent. Then the transmission came. A figure appeared on the central holoscreen, clad in a dark, high-collared uniform. Supreme Commander Elias Verne, humanity's highest-ranking military leader. His expression was calm, but his eyes were cold. The United Coalition of Species, he began, his voice level, declared itself the rightful ruler of the galaxy. You crushed the Zarn and believed there were no threats left to challenge you. He leaned slightly forward. You were wrong. Carvax swallowed hard. We did not seek war with Earth. We merely assumed we would submit. Verne's tone remained measured, but there was an edge to it now. You sent us a message demanding compliance. You never thought we would have our own response. Silence. Carvax had no answer. Verne continued. Asterisk, the UCS believed itself untouchable. That era ends today. From now on, Earth will have a seat at the table, an equal seat. Sulek, still recovering from the shock of the battle, hissed. You think we will simply let you dictate the terms? Verne's lips curled slightly, a hint of amusement. We don't need your permission. We just prove that. On the tactical display, UCS survivors were attempting to regroup. Their remaining capital ships had begun pulling back, forming defensive perimeters. But there was no counterattack coming. They had already lost. Carvax exhaled slowly. He was a warrior, but he was not a fool. This was not the time for stubborn defiance. His bioluminescence flickered, the color of submission. What are your terms? Verne nodded, as if this had been the only logical outcome. Earth will be recognized as a dominant power within the UCS. Human oversight will be established over military strategy, technological development, and expansion efforts. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. And understand this, there will be no second warnings. Carvax closed his eyes. The UCS had spent decades shaping the galaxy. Now, humanity had rewritten the rules in a single day. As the transmission ended, Verne left them with a final message, his voice steady but filled with unmistakable authority. Next time, don't mistake silence for weakness. And with that, the dreadnoughts of Earth turned and disappeared into the void, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same again.